Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference virtual track. My name is Kelly Simmons, and I'm really excited to be with you here today. I want to thank the Women in Engineering group, Santa Clara Valley as well, because we've done some great partnering work with them, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I confess this is going to be my first virtual training. I have been delivering live and working live with groups for 15 years now, and actually was a presenter at the first International Leadership Conference a couple years ago in Santa Clara. So welcome. So I think some of you might have originally seen this title, something about unblocking your biggest challenges with systems thinking, and that is my angle on leadership development, though the title of this one is Designing Your Leadership Journey. We're in an interesting position as engineers, kind of being at a crossroads of working with systems, whatever systems are the focus of your work, but also working within human systems. And as I introduce myself a little bit more going forward, I think it's an interesting nexus, both metaphorically and practically, in that we're navigating systems at the same time that we're developing systems ourselves. So a bit of foreshadowing there. I am an engineer. I'm going to go ahead and start this presentation. If you're welcome, if you're the first time to this web or virtual presentation, and you'll notice in the bottom left corner of your screen a chat box. I'll be asking you some questions as we go through this, our time together, that you can write into the chat box. Have a couple polling questions for you. You'll be able to click directly on the screen and make some votes. And I'll try and address questions as they come up, but I'm leaving most of the Q&A to the end. So pay attention to your screen, see where all those different pieces are, and we'll get going. So, as the title says, I'm working at the Center for Creative Leadership, and I just want to tell you a little bit about us, and then I'll tell you a little bit about me. The Center for Creative Leadership is an organization that's been around since the early 1970s, but its seeds come from a gentleman named Smith Richardson, who was the founder of the VIX Corporation over 100 years ago. And that was based in North Carolina. It was an organization that started as a small drugstore and expanded to a global chain of products for healing and curing health. And Smith Richardson, when he grew his organization and after he grew, he stepped back and started to take a look at what it took to grow the organization in terms of people and development, and decided that focusing on leadership development was actually really important, and he wanted to have his legacy be associated with that. So we are they're a foundation behind our organization. The Center for Creative Leadership is a nonprofit, and we're the largest organization globally focused only on the research and investigation of leadership development. So different from a business school, we have similar things in that business schools can also offer leadership development, but our research base is only solely focused on research and development. Our global mission is to advance the understanding, practice, and development of leadership for the benefit of society worldwide. And we have about 25,000 people. The number on the bottom of the screen there is a little bit incorrect. About 25,000 people come for our programs annually. They come to one of our campuses. You can see them on the bottom of the screen there. And we also do the same volume of work in the humanitarian sector, so 25,000 people in underserved communities around the world. We have a couple sites in Africa that we're spreading the leadership work across the continent, and other places in the world as well. And we also work on organizational transformation and culture change, which is not mentioned here on the slide. So that's a little bit about the Center for Creative Leadership. I'm actually speaking with you today outside of the San Diego campus. I did, however, join them at their Brussels campus. I was based in Barcelona for 11 years, working across Europe, and joined the organization back there. So I've worked with a wide variety of global clients, large multinationals, some smaller organizations too. And when we work on our campuses, we have people coming in from individuals from different organizations for leadership development programs. So a little bit about me. And I didn't put a slide for this. I didn't think it didn't cross my mind when I was putting this together. So I am an engineer, actually. I'm a mechanical engineer. I studied in California at the University of California. And went to work for Hewlett-Packard straight out of university. And one of the things that I remembered most, actually, during my studies was meeting a woman from HP who came to speak at the Society of Women Engineers meeting, and her sharing with us that work-life balance was a complete fallacy. She was a mother, she was an executive at HP, and it was completely a difficult challenge. And I don't know why, that's just one of those things that made a note in my mind when I started my career. Women's leadership wasn't really a priority focus because I was very focused just on accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish in my work, doing a great job, learning as much as I could, and growing as much as I could. I started off manufacturing our all-in-one products, doing when they first came onto the market, which were the printer copier scanners. We were outsourcing manufacturing globally. We were involved in doing that for the first time, which was really exciting. But then I went down to Mexico, and I was working in their distribution area and had to work with shipping our products all over 18 countries of Latin America. And while that seems less sophisticated from a technology point of view than what I was doing before, which it was highly more complicated from a human dynamics point of view. And I found myself caught in this web of the human system that I was working with down in Latin America. That fascinated me more. And since then, I segued my career over into the organizational development, leadership development space. So that's just a little bit about me, and I don't want to take too much more time on introductions, and I want to get this thing kicked off. So even though I can't hear who's on the line, I want to get your involvement. One of the things that's shaping the way we even conceive our careers are the trends in society. So when I entered the workforce, I had this dream that work was going to be a wonderful collaboration of people from all over the world coming together, working on exciting, challenging products to advance the good of society. And what I found was that there was a lot of roadblocks in the way. But as we've gone on, and in a couple of decades since I first entered the workforce, there are some trends that are shaping society that I think are actually beneficial to our and enable our leadership and enable our advancement in more creative and unique ways. So I want to bring this next slide to you guys for your consideration. This slide is some of the key trends that we see facing society and enabling society. So everything from, and just hold on a second here because I'm trying to get a better view for myself of this slide, and I'm not seeing it so large. But anything from the naked organization, which is more organizational transparency, to millennials in the workplace, which maybe a lot of you are millennials, which are really transforming and holding up a higher standard or different standard for the way we work, towards the Uberized economy where you can be your own boss, you can be anywhere. And I think that's a very interesting one for us as women as well as for the society in general, where we get to really own and be our own boss. And furthermore, we're going to have to rethink careers because we're going to all be maybe more specialized in some way. If you look at anti-fragility, that's a very interesting trend. And that one really speaks to our ability to be resilient. I work with a lot of senior leaders, and one of the things that stands out most is the ability to weather adversity, whether it's economic adversity, whether it's a specific downturn in their organization, whether it's something very personal and deep that's affected them. Whatever it is, the ability to learn through adversity, to rise up and to make the most of the situation that life delivers you is actually one of the other big trends that we're seeing today, as well as conscious company, etc. I want you guys to have a look at those and think, when you see these trends, what's the one that calls to you most? Is it one that you're already aware of and that you tap into as part of your day-to-day? Is it one that you align with? Is it one that you're passionate about? Is there one that you think is a great enabler of your career growth? And just as a means of getting your involvement, I'm going to go to the next slide, and it's a polling question. You're going to see all the titles of those particular trends, and you're going to have the opportunity to vote. And we can see kind of where people in this group are at. So there you go. Those are the titles in a linear, in a column format. Have a look through and have a vote. If I don't see votes coming in, then I'll know to explain a couple of them more. The new women's century, this moving women into more senior leadership positions is truly a focus of this work here. And even though you may be coming to a women's development program, this may be the most important thing to you, it may not be. There's something else that's driving you and motivating you. There's a lot of exciting work in bringing women more into senior leadership positions, and we know now more than ever that our society needs it. So there's just a few of you on the call right now. A little bit of a spread between data visualization, embracing the future, and the changes that are coming with it. The Uberized economy with slightly more votes, and the new women's century. Some more votes coming in. Beyond data visualization. This is to me one of the most fascinating ones. Some of the regrets that I have, and actually as I've moved away from technology, is this. I think that's a really fascinating space. What we can do with data, how we can make it more meaningful in our lives, and I'm excited by all the work that's going on in that space as well. Anybody else interested in voting? So when you think about these things, these trends, you just might want to think about how they can help shape or contribute to your future, whether it's the content of your work, whether it's the way and method that you work, as with I see a little bit about the Uberized economy, tackling both. But the dialogue that we've had, even with the topic of women's leadership, has changed, and these trends are actually shaping the change itself. So we could not have this conversation, the same conversation that we're going to have today, even 10 years ago. These things weren't as popular, or as prevalent, I should say. So I'm just looking through the data, and oh, actually, hold on a second. I think I'm seeing a screen that you guys might not be. So here we go. I'm advancing it for you guys. I had the ability to see that data before. I think 3/4 of you have voted. So we have about 25% for the new women's century, 25% for the Uberized economy, 13% for the conscious company, 25% for beyond data visualization, and 13% for embracing the future. Very interesting. So holding that in the mind, and that's sort of like, to me, the big umbrella of, this is the society I'm living in, this is how I'm advancing myself forward, these are the things that are driving it and inspiring me and also affecting our society. So what does that mean in terms of my leadership development and in terms of women's leadership development in general? I want to give a quick acknowledgement to the work that we've done at the Center for Creative Leadership to advance women's leadership development over this time. We started writing about and researching women's leadership development in the early 80s. So one of our first publications was Breaking the Glass Ceiling. That was published in the early 80s. And that, you know, when the phrase came, breaking the glass ceiling or the glass ceiling, it was around this time. So we were there at the beginning, doing the early research, seeing where women were and women weren't. Now, it's funny, a client of mine asked me, oh, should I get that book? Can I get that book and read it? And, I don't want to not sell something. While there's a lot of research truth in that book, but because it was written in the 80s, and here we are in 2016, things have changed dramatically for women and towards the positive. So I think it's a real testament to see where we've come from and what still remains the same. So I'm just going to ask my engineer here if he can help me make my screen bigger so that I can read what's on my slides. So hang on a second. Screen, slides bigger. So some of the things that I think are really important, and actually it says up here that we actually introduced women's leadership development in the late 80s. So we started the research in the early 80s, started introducing women's leadership programs in the late 80s, and have been doing it ever since. But there's really been a change. There's been a change in more women in management roles, and there's been a change in more perception by women and men of the competence and the contribution of men and women since we did our early work in the early 80s. And this is something that some of you who are millennials are not even aware of because you weren't alive then, but people that have gone through the generations do see the difference, myself included. I like this this particular data point because it really struck a chord with me, the one about in 2008 and 2009, companies with more women on the senior leadership and on the senior leadership weathered the economic crisis better. I was living in Barcelona, Spain, at the time when the economy took its downturn. So we had a lot of visibility on Europe and what was going on in Europe. I was really struck by what was happening in Iceland and how when the government tanked, they put women at the front lines to, I want to say, fix it, put it back together, make sense of it. So this particular data point really speaks to me, and it really speaks to a kind of a shift, which is common sense to me and to maybe you, but wasn't really in the mainstream society, of the importance of having, the impact of having women on the senior leadership levels. And that data point, despite what's happening in some of our engineering firms, is relevant, and the companies that are seeing that having women in the senior leadership positions is turning better results is actually a validated data point. We're seeing it when we do our research as well. A couple more things. Sorry, I have the screen that is showing up a little bit small. So today, women, as I mentioned before, hold on a second. Okay, so today, as I mentioned before, there's more women seeing themselves as competent as men. And I'm sorry for the little bit of the technical glitch right now because I'm just getting used to this system for the first time. And that's very important. So, and I'm going to explain a little bit more about self-perception and the impact of self-perception on women's leadership and how that's shifted over time. The thing, though, that is a little bit disconcerting, and this is a thing that has driven me from not being involved in women's leadership development to being involved in women's leadership development. So what you see there is that statistically we're seeing many more women in management roles, but startlingly few women in senior leadership roles. So I left the United States to work in foreign countries in about 1999, and I spent a long time living outside the United States, and I came back in 2013. And when I came back into 2013, I after having been a consultant for more than a decade, I entered back into the technology field on the learning and development side. So I went into Qualcomm Technologies at that particular time, and what startled me was to see how few people were advancing in senior leadership roles as compared to men, and the number of women on the senior leadership team was 1 at the time. And we were at an all-hands meeting, and this singular woman was announcing that she was moving into another role, into another company. And someone from the audience raised his hand and said to the CEO, and said, so what do you think about the fact, and what's the implications of the fact that there's going to be no women in the senior leadership team? And the CEO just stood there, stoic, and says, that's something we're going to have to work on. But it really caught me by surprise after having left technology so many years earlier and then come back to it to see that we were still in the similar situation. And my question was, why is it? What are we doing in our organizations that aren't promoting more women? And what are we doing in our leadership development that's not advancing more women into the higher level ranks of leadership development? And that's a little bit of the focus, and actually that is the focus of the work. And so when I started partnering with the IEEE, Women in Engineering, and the International Women's Leadership Conference that I wanted to address. And so some of the themes actually are still the same as 20 years ago, but some of the things have shifted. And I think we're at an interesting point right now where both our society is wanting to see more women in senior leadership roles, and there's a part of that that's a social issue that needs to be addressed at a larger social level and at a structural level in programs that are happening in organizations to advance women leaders. But there's also a role that each of us as women need to hold in our own careers. And there's people that do it well, and there's people that do it less well. And it does make a difference when getting to the top. So for the next half hour or so, that's what I want to focus on with you, and leave some time at the end of our talk to have some questions and answers. Okay? So the shift is going to focus on your leadership development. Now, it might be surprising that I'm putting a photo of a man here. And this is Kevin Houvain. Now, do any of you know who he is? If you do, write in the chat box. And I don't have great expectations of that because he's not in technology. Now, if you have a data source on the side and you can be searching it up on the internet, you might find it pretty quickly who it is. But this is actually a very important person advancing women in their roles. So Kevin Houvain is one of the most successful agents in Hollywood. He started off managing Sarah Jessica Parker and has gone on to manage this roster of women actresses. He also represents some male actors as well, Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, etc. So you might be thinking, why would I be bringing an agent into women's leadership development talk? So I'm going to put that question back to you. How does an agent, and this guy is a particularly successful one, what does he do to advance these women in their careers, and how is that relevant to each one of you on this call? So what does this agent do to advance women in their careers, and how is that relevant to you? One thing, and I'll give you this, and then I'm going to put you guys some questions. One of the things that he's really known for, and he revolutionized in Hollywood, let's say, is the idea of having a personal brand, so that each one of these actresses started having to do some kind of work to figure out what their personal brand was. And he has worked with that and with them to be able to advance their place in Hollywood. So Karen Corbett's writing in, he puts them in powerful roles. Absolutely. So I'm going to put the questions out to you, these more. So what does an agent do for a movie star? And so Karen's writing in saying he puts them in powerful roles. What other kinds of things does he do? He represents them so that they can get put into powerful roles. Absolutely. What other things does an agent do for these stars? You know, there's probably about a dozen of you on the call right now. In the bottom left corner is a chat box. Would love to see what's going on your minds as part of this. So he puts them in a powerful roles, then and squashes negative press. Very good. So some interaction with what's going on in the media around them. Absolutely. What else does he do? Motivates. Fantastic. I can imagine when you're not getting roles, someone coming and motivating you, go for a more challenging role than you've tried before, right? Because the main thing about some of these actresses that have longevity is they keep pushing their boundaries and having a champion there to help motivate them. Coaching on where to develop them for future roles, absolutely. Fights for equal pay, absolutely, and that's a big topic, and that's one of the ones I think that's become into the public eye that's been more visible in the recent few years, where women are standing up and saying publicly that we want extra pay. So this motivation and support for them to do it, being their front line. Now, an agent's a representative, so he has a certain role, but he doesn't control everything. So how does he do it, or she do it, if it's in the case of a female agent? And what makes an agent really good? What are the skills and qualities to be able to enable these activities, putting them into powerful roles, squashing negative press, motivating, coaching, fighting for equal pay? What are the techniques, strategies, behaviors that an agent does to enable these outcomes that you're describing above? So write those in. There's some networking, absolutely. One of the best network agents in Hollywood. he builds their confidence and believes them. So the real work with the actress or actor himself and herself, absolutely. Kind of going back into that coaching. Takes care of the small things. Mm-hmm. Now, I mentioned to you that Kevin Huvane is known for helping them discover their brand. How do you think he might go about doing that? Loyalty and trust, absolutely. So that sort of comes from a commitment to their best success, because that's how you get loyalty and trust. You don't get loyalty and trust if you're thinking just how much of a percentage I'm going to get from this person, but that you're really committed to them as people and advancing them as people. That complete trust, absolutely. Looking for their strengths. Thank you, Karen. Absolutely. Having good business and marketing skills, absolutely. So getting to their strengths and having those marketing skills is really part of building a brand. Listening and asking insightful questions. Maria, that's exactly right. And that is going to serve an agent on both sides of working with the client herself, as well as working with the movie producers and the people looking for, for that actress, and helping match the two of them. So being a good listener and asking those insightful questions are really important. So I want you to think about those particular skills that you guys just wrote up right there, because I'm going to switch the question. How are you at being your own agent? Now, we don't all have the luxury of having an agent for us at work, but wouldn't it be nice? How many of you would like to have an agent that would represent you and help you advance your career in your company and help you get those challenging roles? And help you tap into your strengths, and help you get the equal pay if that's not your situation, and help you squash the negative press that might be circulating around affecting your advancement in your leadership. So Karen writes in saying women usually don't feel as comfortable selling themselves. Absolutely. That's not the typical thing. That's not comfortable. I would say it's not comfortable for a lot of people. It's especially not comfortable for women. And we're going to explain a little bit more and look why that might be the case. So this is really important. And I want you to take a moment now, just having had that reflection and having looked at the things that you just wrote in about what makes a great agent, and ask yourself, well, actually, here's a polling question. I forgot that I had that there. How are you at being your own agent? So here's some choices. I've never thought about that before, and I don't do anything to be my own agent. Okay, this is with regards to you. I've never thought about it before, and I do some things naturally, though I probably could do more. Or, I'm really not doing too much about it, and I think that I could do a lot more. Or, I've thought about it, and I'm doing some things towards being my own agent, and I want to do more. Or, I know it, I understand it, it's part of the way that I work. Kind of just think about that for a second, where you see yourself. So about 2/3 of you have answered the question. Anybody else want to answer? So here's what's showing up. 11% saying, never thought about it before, don't do anything to be my own agent. 11% saying, some things I actually do naturally, even though I don't think about it. 22% saying that you think you could do a lot more. about half of you saying, no, actually, I thought about it, and there's some more that I could probably do. Which kind of goes in line with, I think, the knowledge in our society and our knowledge as women leaders. I would imagine that those of you replying to this on I've thought about it and I'm doing some things towards being it have probably been reading about women's leadership development and advancement in some context or being exposed to it in your everyday. And I don't have this as a polling question, but I'll just ask it as a rhetorical question, which is, how many of you in your organizations have been told that having a brand and selling yourself is important, and not just as women, but just in general, like having that be a popular or a theme in your work? I know when I came back to the United States and I was working in Qualcomm, I know that was something that was being talked about in more flat organizations and more matrix structured organizations. People are saying you need to be proactive in making yourself stand out, and so that kind of rhetoric is coming up. So it's not surprising that's not in the mind of some of you. Deidre saying it's a very popular thing. Karen saying absolutely have to have a brand. Exactly. So in some of our organizations, that is the topic. The question is maybe how does that differ for women than men? And there's actually quite a lot to those pieces as well. All right. So I'm going to move on. And actually the next question basically is, if you were to take a couple notes right now, just take a pause to reflect. If you have a piece of note paper in front of you, just identify, based on our earlier conversation, what are some of the things that you do for yourself to represent yourself? So how are you, what are you doing that helps you be your own agent? And what are you not doing for yourself that could help? Everyone's story is probably a little bit different. So just take a few notes on that. I'm just going to pause for 30 seconds or so. When I started my career at Hewlett-Packard, I started with a lot of confidence. I had interesting projects, a great manager, a lot of resources to my availability. I didn't perceive a gender gap at that point in time at all. And it was easy to be my own advocate. I felt like early in my career that was just the easiest time. And I think that research is showing that women entering into engineering fields at the very beginning tend to feel pretty good about it and feel on solid footing and equal footing. And so it was easy with a lot of curiosity, a lot of opportunities to learn, a lot of projects to get involved with. It was very easy to just keep growing. But after a few years, I went to Mexico and took a foreign assignment there. And I really didn't have as much language domination as I thought I did. And I was so focused on learning to speak Spanish better on my job that I forgot about this role, my own role of self-advocacy. And I noticed myself feeling, I would say, more isolated, uncomfortable in the organization. And it was one of those things that in hindsight, your hindsight's 20/20 and you can see things much more clearly, but not being my own advocate, not even being my own agent, and not necessarily just for career advancement, but for getting the resources I need, getting the support that I need, and helping me be as strong as I possibly could in my current role is also the role of being an agent or being your own agent. And so it's not always about advancement. It can be just about complete success in what you're doing right now, which then obviously helps you advance. But that was a point that when I look back on it, I wasn't serving myself as well as I could have in that particular environment. Again, because of the outside circumstances that triggered me, but I didn't have the thinking or awareness that I needed to be looking out for myself in a more holistic sense as I was in that role. So just something to think about, that it's not always about advancement. It's also about what kind of agency do you need for yourself to just be really successful at what you're doing right now. Are you enabling all the resource availability that you need, all the mentoring and support that's going to help you have a solid platform where you are right now? All right, so we're going to move now into thinking about what are some of the skills and qualities of leaders. There's a lot of conversation these days about gender bias, new language around it. And so what I want to introduce us to or into this conversation is having is understanding more holistically leadership skills and what's considered masculine and what's considered feminine. And I say that because, leadership as a whole, we're a whole people coming to work. So this is a matrix of qualities of people. And you'll notice the left side of the matrix says feminine qualities and the right side of the matrix says masculine qualities. And that's because if you look across cultures and societies and over histories, there's certain qualities that are considered feminine qualities and certain characteristics are considered masculine qualities, but that men have feminine qualities and women have masculine qualities. And we talk about that much more in our leadership because truthfully, even to be a successful male leader, you have to have a healthy balance of feminine qualities. And to be a successful female leader, you have to have a healthy balance of masculine qualities. But it gets a little bit tricky. So it gets tricky on a couple of levels. One, because every strength has a shadow side. So you'll notice that this matrix is divided into two rows. The top row is, we'll say, sort of the positive manifestation of a quality. The bottom row is the negative manifestation of that quality. So any strength, and those of you that have mentioned strengths, knowing your strengths, will probably also have heard that when we work with strengths, it's great. We want to leverage those. But strengths used at the wrong time or too much turn into weaknesses. And that's something for us, especially as women, to think about. But strengths used at the wrong time or too much are seen as weaknesses. So there's a couple things here that I want to talk to. And first of all, let's just look at the top row. So when you look at the top row, you see empathy, gentleness, inclusion on the left side, etc., clarity, assertiveness, and focus, and direction on the right side. And I just want you to think for yourself. Think of a pair, something from the left that you see in yourself, something from the right that you see in yourself. Maybe take a moment and type that into the chat box. That could be, inclusion and assertiveness, or nurturing and direction. Just two things that you see that you self-identify with, and type that in. Because we're really whole leaders, and we need that whole space of leadership that we brought to the table. Inclusion and assertiveness. Thanks, Karen. Openness and structure. Gentleness, creativity, and discipline. Fantastic. Gentleness and discipline. These are called polarities. And we talk all the time in our work at leadership development about polarities because, and I'll tell you the first polarity that I ever heard of. When Carly Fiorina took over HP and she bought Compaq, and it was the beginning of, we'll say, the beginning of a new phase in HP's history. But she said she was the first person that spoke about polarities. And she says, I want you to reduce costs and increase profit, right? That's a polarity. Two completely at the two opposite ends of the spectrum. And I don't want to get into that particular conversation, but when we talk about polarities, we want to be talking about holding both sides in kind of a creative tension. So how do you hold creativity and discipline in a creative tension? Because creativity without discipline can become very dispersed and not focused. But together, they can create a nice whole when held in creative tension. So we want to put them in the mindset of all leaders that you're walking on a polarity, and which is the one that gives you the most effective, the effective advancement. So how does openness and structure work together? Gentleness and discipline as well, that Flavia wrote down in there below. And that's what a polarity is all about. It's a very good marketing tool as well. When you're talking to a leader and they say, you're being assertive, you could say, yes, I'm being assertive, but I'm also being inclusive, and we need to advance our project and speak to both of those things. So that's something first to keep in mind, is that we are whole people, and that when you also see your male leaders or your male colleagues, you'll see that they have some of the feminine traits, maybe more, maybe less. But what happens when we talk about, sorry, I'm just going to advance the slide here. What happens as a couple in our day-to-day is because of the way men see men and the men see women and the way women can see themselves. But the way women can be misperceived is that inclusiveness can more easily be seen as neediness, or depending on how it shows up, or there might be a tendency to see someone that seeks variety as being unfocused, or seeking harmony as being manipulative. And that's on the same side as the masculine qualities. I will never forget, in one of my first engineering positions, not at Hewlett-Packard, at another mechanical engineering firm, and one of the partners came in to me after I was, or he didn't come to me, I was actually explaining something to him with a lot of emphasis and excitement. I tend to be assertive and quite passionate when I'm, feeling like something needs to go in a certain direction. And he told me how aggressive I was and how this was going to really be a hindrance in my career. And I was completely shocked as a 22-year-old engineer to receive such a comment. I don't know if any of you have run into similar things where you feel that you've been misperceived. You've been seen on the bottom end of the bottom right quadrant of the masculine qualities instead of the top right quadrant. So there is some truth into men associating assertiveness with men, but when they see a woman doing the same thing, jumping to calling that and considering that aggressive. This is not going to be surprising. This is not new research for you guys. I see Enid saying that passion is seen as aggressiveness. So kind of resonating with what I mentioned below. Yeah, absolutely. And that's a very frustrating thing. And so the question that we have for ourselves is, that's why it's like a bigger issue than just yourself, but what can you do, and how can we not manage our behavior to not show up as the energetic, passionate people that we are, but to choose our timing, to understand who's in front of us, what their mindset might be, and shape and modify our reactions so that we can advance our leadership in the way that we want to. So leadership's not about changing who you are. It's kind of about knowing your environment and managing as best as you can. And sometimes it's literally diagramming your environment and figuring out who are the people, and how are they responding to different things that we do. So this is not an easy, there's not really an easy answer on this, but it's really an awareness question, and getting an assessment of how you're being seen by others on regards to this. Does anyone else besides Enid have a comment as to how they've been misunderstood from a positive quality being seen as a negative quality, or like we'll call it an unconscious quality? Susie mentioned empathy. Can you you want to write in a bit more? Is it about the need to have empathy with the people that are our male counterparts that might be misunderstanding us? So I don't know if you want to write on that. There's many ways that we want to receive more empathy from others, and we also need to kind of show it to be able to get there. It's a complex topic. So that's why we say leadership development is it's a social issue. There's a lot of work in some organizations having a broad range topic of mental models, biases being addressed in some of the larger corporations. So that's a trend that I'm seeing, which is another one of those positive forces that will help things going forward. And the same question always when we go back to an individual leadership development standpoint is, how conscious of your own behavior and the impact that you're having on others so that you can shift and adjust your behavior appropriately. So one thing that I consistently see, because gender bias exists, but I consistently still do see women at the top and women getting to the top. And the question I always have is, how are you getting there? What is it that you're doing differently? And sometimes it's simply not perceiving the difference and that consistently going and reaching those goals. One of the people that had some impact on me early in my career, and I'm just looking for the name, was early in my career when I was at HP. They actually held a women's leadership conference just for HP women. And one of the speakers at that conference was a NASA engineer named Diana Blaney. And Diana had set the first Land Rover on Mars. And it was really interesting, the questions that came to her, like, how could you do this? NASA was so male dominated. How could you advance this? And she had one thing to say, basically, because I had a vision since I was 12 years old that I was going to be involved in the in developing things for our solar system. And that was a single focus that she carried all that time. And that with that focus, what that's enabled, and as I talk to senior women leaders, is adjusting your behavior. So looking at these skills below, but adjusting your behavior and being able to flex to all the different people that are in your environment. So that could be, asking questions, getting curious, finding ways to partner with people on new projects, seeking opportunities to learn, whatever it is that doesn't necessarily take away from you being assertive in a given moment in time, but shows your openness and that your focus is still, on the role and on the place that you're trying to move to. So not everybody has that singular focus, but women that I see that have advanced significantly in the organization that are assertive, they do have order, they do show strength, but they also show a heavy dose of openness, of trust, of inclusiveness, and are holding both of those polarities in balance all the time and are able to adjust and flex their behavior to the different environments so that they are, moved right along. And that's part of it, and that's not all of it. So I'm going to move on to the next thing. This is a new piece of research that is more recent, and this is kind of revealing, though maybe not so intuitive. When we talked about brand, I asked you, what do you do? I asked you a question about your own self-awareness. What do you do and what do you not do? That's a self-reflective question to each of you about what you think. And we measure self-awareness in our leaders, and the more self-aware a leader is, the more they're aware of what they're doing and not doing. A less self-aware leader may be moving more reflexively and not being as aware of what they're doing because they're just moving more reflexively. So that's one aspect of self-awareness. We find that women leaders are quite self-aware in that regard. But there's one aspect of self-awareness that's been less studied. And that aspect of self-awareness is how well women predict what their male colleagues think of them in terms of their competence. And what they found is that there's a tendency for women leaders to underestimate how competent their peers and their superiors that are male see them. So I want you to think about that for a minute. And I don't know and think about if you identify with that. There's research that supports that women don't see or imagine when they're asked to predict how competent their colleagues see them, they tend to self-rate that lower. And what that means, so we're competent, we see ourselves for how we are, don't have such an accurate view on how others see us, tending towards seeing ourselves as less, thinking that they see us as less competent as we are. And that creates kind of a conundrum for us, which is what roles are you promoting for? What raises are you asking for? Are you networking to find your next sponsor in the organization? So there's a question there on what that awareness or lack of awareness has as an impact on your behaviors. It's more subtle. It's harder for us to actually measure that. But what we're making hypotheses around is the impact of having that attitude on women standing up and asking for that fair pay and that being sort of asking for that raise, or willing to go for positions that might be stretch roles for them. And what they do find is that men are willing to go for a stretch role more than a woman. And a woman feels that she needs to have more competence before going to a stretch role. And so there's some kind of wondering if this particular data point is an influencer of that. So I want you to think about that for yourself. How accurate do you think your view is of your colleague's view of you? Do you think they see you as well as you see yourself? And how confident are you of your assessment of their perception of you? So just take a second and think about that. And I'm looking at the time, and as we get close to the hour, I want to make sure that I move through a couple pieces of content. How many of you have mentors? Just type into the chat box, I do. They could be formal mentors or informal mentors. How many people count on mentors? Deidre says I do. Karen says I do. Anybody else say I do? Shana says no. I had a mentor when I first entered HP. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It helped me navigate the organization. When I joined Qualcomm, and this was in 2014, I was surprised that they didn't have a mentoring program. Because it had been almost 20 years earlier that I entered HP and had a mentor. And the impact that it had on integrating me into the job and into that career path and everything was so much faster, and I attribute it 90% to having a mentor. I'm a bright person, and you guys are all bright people, but having somebody show you the ropes sure makes that process a lot quicker. Ali says, I have an informal one, but I do have one. Enid says no. Flavia says no. Finding mentors that are people that you can ask questions to about the role, about how things work here, can be very, very helpful. Our research shows, and I do notice that a lot of you actually, or a number of you did say that you do, so about half right now, maybe a little bit more to the no. And still, there's another role that's really important, that we're finding more and more people getting mentored, even though I found it less than it should be. But less women are getting sponsors. And this is what's really important. Less women are getting sponsors than men. More and more we're seeing equality in male and female getting mentorship. Actually, you could almost say more women are getting mentored than men, but more men are getting sponsored than women. And the advancement of leadership is going to come to a great degree through sponsorship. Sponsors also do mentor, and that goes back into your agency thinking. Sponsors are the ones that get you maybe a stretch assignment. They make a referral to you to someone higher in the organization. They enable you to make a presentation to senior leadership. They're people that are wanting to see you as an individual advance and are somewhere in the organization where they can influence that to a degree. They're not going to give you the job, but they're going to see you for your talent. So they need to see that you're working on something that's fascinating, working on something that's interesting, and that you are very relevant to the organization going forward, and that you would be a great candidate in the future in a senior level role. And they're the ones that can start helping you build relationships. They can even give you some mentorship as to your skills, especially in the terms of the leadership skills that are needed to be successful with this particular collective and that particular role. Okay, so that's what sponsors can do. And the fact is that until there's more sponsors of women, it's going to be harder for women to advance, because still likes like, and if there's a whole bunch of men at the top, you're still dealing with that kind of umbrella. So what we're working on in our leadership development programs is really getting women to get sponsorship. And mentorship is important, and if you're not having a mentor right now, looking around and thinking, who would you like to ask questions to? Who would you like to get advice from? And making sure that you find those people and start asking those questions and getting advice is really important. So early in my career, HP had this great program, and it was all formal, and I was, David was assigned to be my mentor, and someone else was assigned to be my colleague's mentor, and we all had mentors, and it was fantastic. Rosy Flowers. I come back 20 years later, I see that's not happening everywhere, but it doesn't mean you can't find your mentors, and that you can't proactively seek people that are willing to take a little bit of extra time to help you advance and learn more about your role. I'm going to go really quickly through this. When we work in our women's leadership program, some of the themes that come up for building your brand as a woman are having control over one's destiny. These are themes that are coming up for women, that every day more women really want to have control over their destiny and where they're going in their lives. They spend more time getting clear on their values and their beliefs. And if you look at all those trend changes that we talked about at the beginning of the program, that's driving this, because we're in a situation now where we can actually influence the way our careers go and influence the way organizations go. So women are spending more time on this because the way work has been organized before, the way our companies are structured, sometimes don't embrace all of us being in control of our destiny, all of us and our own values. So we're wanting to feel whole in our work. We want to have the whole person represented, and thanks to the advances that the millennials are making for all of us, it's being part of that. So I want just to click through these pretty quickly. Seeking authenticity and making connections, really going back to the mentoring. I think of also mentoring as talking with your colleagues and women colleagues and even men colleagues, and having conversations of what you can learn from each other, because now we're also realizing that we don't learn isolated. Even though you have a task at hand and a project you're working on, the learning that it takes to develop your leadership also comes much more, especially for women, in working in groups. Okay, so having people you can talk to about these topics that are colleagues and whatnot is very important. I'm not going to spend much more time on that. Your leadership journey is something that looks quite much more like a spiral than a linear path. And it's because each one of you, and I think we have people from around the globe, typically at these early morning hours. I'm in California, but no one's up yet. We have people from around the globe. We have a lot of different things that are happening, both in our minds, from what our beliefs are, from what our society has educated us in, for the way we saw the world from when we were born to how we do it now. So when I'm working with leaders, I'm always thinking of what are the mental models, what are the frameworks that you're coming into your work with. We have our work and the conditions that are around us that are affecting us. We have our personality style, because each of you are unique. And that also affects the way we show up at work. You know, some of these things that we're talking about come easier for some and less easier for others, just based on our personality. So when we do our leadership development programs, we are looking at a whole person. And so it's like, what's your personality style? What works for you? Where are you coming from in the models and views that your society and your family have infused in you as you've grown? What's your work environment like? What's going on there? And what are you wanting to do, and where are you wanting to go in your career? So it's not really like, okay, check the box and go through 5 different things. It's all of those things coming together. Knowing your strengths is part of it. Knowing your personality style is part of it. You know, knowing the story that you tell yourself is part of it as well. So I don't know if any of you guys are going to have time after the hour. So I'm kind of starting to accelerate the click-through on this. But the reflection I want to give to each of you is, what do you think you need to do to advance your leadership? Kind of what are you willing to commit to that effort? So just think about that for 30 seconds. I'm going to click to the next slide pretty soon. So I want to show you a couple more things, ask you a couple more questions. This is kind of a race through. It's hard to do so much in a short amount of time. A lot of the work is kind of reflective as well. But I trust that by asking that question, it has that seed in your head. Stuff that some of you are probably already working on it. Some of you maybe have a spark on something new from what we've been talking about. We're happy to be partnering with IEEE and the Women in Engineering to develop a learning journey for women. This is going to take place over time. This is just a window pane of what we're thinking it's going to look like. And I just wanted to show it to you. I want to show you a couple things. One is, it's a journey. Leadership development is a journey. It's a lifelong thing. When we want to bring women together in a way that's very agile, that takes people out of their workplace as little as possible, but that puts them into the right environment to work together with like-minded people and advance themselves for the good of themselves and for the good of their organizations. So there will be some assessment, maybe even a coaching session before coming to a short 2-day program. We may even do this virtually, and that's the other part that we're actually looking at as well. And that program is going to be working on each individual specific situation and how they want to and think, and developing a strategy for themselves to advance in their organization to get the sponsorship they need to advance their careers. After the in-person program, people are going to come together in small cohorts of 5 or so people with an action learning coach, and each of one's going to have an action learning project, which is sort of like, what is your plan in your program? You're going to work with small groups of women to advance that, and those are going to be virtual. At the same time, a lot of people want to learn different things, and so you guys might want to think about what are those things. And I'm going to put a slide up in just a second to share with you where you can do a parallel asynchronous learning in a virtual track. I know a lot of your companies probably offer some asynchronous learning right now, but having it tied into your learning journey, which this is really important, so that when you're choosing to learn something, it's tied into a larger picture of where you're trying to advance career-wise, and it's part of your program. So it allows you to take an asynchronous learning journey, but to have it be sensible and tied into that. And obviously, and then the line sort of halfway, 2/3 of the way down, mentoring and sponsorship is what we're working on, partnering with IEEE and the Women in Engineering Society to advance for all, to create for all the participants in these learning journey programs. So one of two last polling questions. We talk about skill development as sometimes a part of their learning journey. So here's a list of some skills that women leaders coming through our programs tend to prioritize. I want you to look at those. I'm going to put up another slide that's a polling slide and vote for 5. So just get you aware: self-awareness, executive presence, influence, negotiation, developing others. Politically savvy has to do with how well you navigate the organization, building relationships, especially parallel and superior. Positive self-promotion. Presence, which is sort of having to do with your being kind of tied into listening, being aware in the moment, strategic thinking and acting, empathy, innovation, resilience, communication, working across the organization. So I see people are starting to type in some answers there. I know some people probably have to drop off, but hopefully some of you can take some time. All right, looks like 100% of people have voted. That was a quick poll. And let me move ahead so we can see the results. Okay, so quite a spread. And this is the thing that I'm finding a lot, is that there is a spread of people wanting to work on different things. Maybe some things are less important, like working across the organization that I think most of you are skilled at. Developing others, I'm happy to see, is not your top priority right now. But look at some of these, everything from negotiation to executive presence, political savvy, positive self-promotion, strategic thinking and acting. So when, it's a really custom journey for all of you, which is why we're trying to create a situation where people can learn together but also learn apart, so that they can pick up the things that they really need to do differently and unique from each other. I'm going to move on to another question. And this question is the last one. What support do you want from your journey? And that is basically, I've talked about getting sponsors. I mentioned coaching, or you guys have even brought up coaching. Working with a cohort of like-minded women. Having assessments, that's something that can be helpful. Having mentors. Doing e-learning. Having an in-person session. And I've put up here a list of things that if you could choose and you could build into a journey for yourself, what would you choose? Because of the time, I'm not going to go through every single one of them individually. I'm just going to go to the polling slide, which is that list. And if you could choose 4 things that you think you would like for yourself, what would they be? Brief in-person learning, longer in-person learning, virtual learning, organizations. And what I found when I moved into the L&D space, the learning and development space, was that there's different things are working for different people. Organizations are genuinely experimenting. So I want you to be personalized. If you could make it yourself exactly the way you wanted to, what would it have? About 2/3 of you have voted in. Now 100%. Let's move to the results. Leadership coach, on-demand e-learning resources, leadership skills assessment, cohort of like-minded women, some blended and virtual, fantastic, action learning, an external IEEE mentor, some people want, 360, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so kind of a spread as well, which is not surprising to me. And it's really great to see some of the things that you consider valuable. I think a blend of having some coaching, having women working together, even coming together mixed with on-demand learning resources, I think is kind of the way we're going. We want a little bit of it all, because some stuff you really do together with others, and some stuff is maybe more individual to you, and you can do it on your own time in your own way. So that's great. Thank you. This is pretty much, this is what I have, and I really wanted to have more time to turn it over to you. I still have time. I'm willing to stay on if people have specific questions. I can stay on for another 5-10 minutes or so. I don't know how busy your days are, but if you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to field those right now. And otherwise, thank you very much for your time and attention. So I think for questions, you can just type them into the chat box. I think there's a Q&A box as well at the bottom, if anyone has any questions. Let's see, I have a question here. What are the main things you see female leadership engineers focus on when it comes to leadership development program? We're seeing people getting around a kind of a combination of getting around their strengths and understanding their strengths and the impact that's having on the organization, but getting that self-clarity that they want, of what they want in their lives, and that controlling of their own destiny. So it's kind of like, this is what I'm good at and this is what I want to do, but also this is how I want to do it, because I don't want to do it any old way. And that sometimes means, in not all cases, once in a while that has meant, I'm going to leave my organization because this is not the right fit for me. That's not the majority, that's a small minority. But a lot of times it helps people shift and understand what they need to emphasize more, what they need to bring to the forefront more, and how they can be more conscious and intentional of choosing their assignments, having different interactions with colleagues, and being very strategic in where they want to put their energy and their work versus just taking what comes to them. Hope that answers that. Enid is asking, how can we obtain more information about the Transforming Leadership Journey in 2017? David, maybe you can help me with this. I would love to get the information from people. I know when it's launched, Women in Engineering will be posting it. If I have contact information, I can also reach out to you guys as that's happening. Actually, let me type in my email address into, let me see if this works. I'm putting my email address into this. I'm happy to hear from any of you. Let's see if that, did that go out? There we go. There's my email address at the bottom of the screen. If you guys want to drop me a note, I can keep you in the loop. Again, we'll be working with Women in Engineering, and that would be pushed out through them, and that's obviously a channel that you guys all have. But please get in if you drop me a note, I can keep you in the loop and keep you part of a short list that we're working with of people interested in this program. Any other questions? And actually, Enid, thanks for your request. We'll be pulling some people together that show a higher level of interest and kind of working with them in even a pilot process. So being involved early can be advantageous as well for all involved. Any more questions? All right. Wanting to be sensitive. I'm sure many of you have other things to go on to. I'm not seeing more questions coming in right now. I am always open to questions. I work at the Center for Creative Leadership. My email is there in the chat box. I'm welcome any questions on this topic or something different related to leadership. Drop me a line. Remind me of where you're in contact from this particular conversation. And again, I really appreciate your participation today. I hope, I know for some of you, the insight is things that you've thought about, things that you've seen before, things you've heard from before. But I wanted to put like the larger framework and sort of say these are the real main topics that we're looking at in women's leadership, and this is how we want to help women and how you might start to think about helping yourself in terms of developing your leadership going forward. So thank you very much, and we'll call it.